A very good morning to you guys. Welcome to the CITE View. My name is Brighton Ncube. CITE View is a show that looks at politics, current affairs, and everything happening in our various communities of Zimbabwe and beyond. And we've been doing this show for a while now, looking at different issues happening in our communities and looking at current affairs. And topical of the issue that has been making waves this past week is the issue of Cyber Security and Data Protection Act, and also that announcement coming from Potras after there was a breakfast meeting held in Bola around the issue of regularizing and licensing different data protection data controllers in Zimbabwe. And joining me this morning is Ellison Shumba, a PhD student at the University of Johannesburg, to understand more in terms of his paper, his research, and in terms of also comparing the two Data Protection Act in Zimbabwe and also Zambia. Good morning to you, sir. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brighton. Thank you for inviting me to your show.
Give us a background in terms of the Cyber Security Act here in Zimbabwe, how your understanding of that act in Zimbabwe, and also in terms of your paper that you're writing, your research paper you're writing. Speak to us more about that background and also how a breakdown of that act there in Zimbabwe.
So the Cyber Security and Data Protection Act in Zimbabwe was passed in 2021 in December. But the actual making of the law started earlier than that. I think if you remember very well, just before 2018, Zimbabwe had a ministry on cybersecurity as well. And then that ministry was dissolved when the second administration came in. And then the Cybersecurity Act was passed in 2021. And it covers a wide range of issues, from how to deal with cybercrime, creating a data supervisory authority, which is a body which has already been in existence in Zimbabwe, which is Potras, which becomes the data supervisory authority. And then it also covers issues in terms of defamation, use of false messaging or misinformation in Zimbabwe, as well as whistleblowing. So it covers a range of issues in terms of how a data protection officer is going to perform their duties and how are they going to be appointed, trained, and stuff like that. So it's really a law that covers broadly in terms of use of digital media, as well as issues to deal with cybersecurity, national security issues, and also how people communicate in the social media space. So it's a very important law that was passed in 2021. And my studies pretty much look at the Data Protection Act in Zimbabwe, as well as the Cybersecurity and Cybercrimes Act in Zambia, also passed in 2021. So I'm looking at these two laws in terms of how they are similar and different, and also looking at the different political situations that were existing in the two countries, and how these laws have been implemented and actually been applied in the two countries in terms of people getting to express themselves freely, and also for the journalistic practice in Zimbabwe and Zambia.
Maybe before you go and compare the two, right? Maybe give us the context of Zimbabwe. How has been that law violating freedom of expression in Zimbabwe, in particular for journalists, content creators, and people who are online? Speak to us around the context of Zimbabwe. How is this law and this act affecting journalists in Zimbabwe?
Okay, so actually the law in Zimbabwe has got interesting sections. For example, section 164C, which speaks on the transmission of false data messages with the intent to cause harm. So this section actually relates to, the term harm is actually broad and can be used to, can be interpreted in multiple ways. So this section provides for sort of like bringing back defamation, which was actually struck out in the Chimakure case in Zimbabwe. So we find these provisions, which were previously struck out by the Constitutional Court, coming back in the form of the Cybersecurity and Data Protection Act. So that section 164C also results in journalists practicing self-censorship, because anything that they can publish or broadcast can be described as a false message with the intent of causing harm. But also, on the other hand, one can say that this section provides for people to fact-check their stories before they are published, so that you make sure that you do not publish something which can cause harm. But the term harm, like I say, is ambiguous and can be defined in multiple ways. And this section provides for, a situation where journalists will start practicing some sort of self-censorship. Then there is also the creation of the Data Protection Authority being POTRAS. I find that quite problematic because POTRAS is already a telecoms regulator. It's also a processor in terms of data. It regulates internet service providers, it regulates your mobile service providers, and then now it's the Data Supervisory Authority. So this creates like a big body, a humongous body with multiple of duties. Will it then be able to be an independent regulator? Will it be able to be fair? So that's also the situation that we see in Zimbabwe. And then you then look at the composition of POTRAS, that it's actually a body that is set up by an act of parliament. And at one time in Zimbabwe, when Superman Dwanzira was the minister, we saw that POTRAS body was actually fired, the main directors of POTRAS. And then the appointments of the current director, who's actually a former director of the Central Intelligence Organization. So that brings about issues of the independence of this Data Supervisory Authority, because this is the body that will train the data protection officers. So how independent will they be when they conduct their duties? Will we not see the same body conducting surveillance on citizens? So it brings into question the provisions of the data, the Act itself. How do the provisions of the Act provide an independent adjudication of the process? Then Section 31 also provides, rules of the authority for authorizing and governing the whistleblowing system. So when whistleblowers are governed by rules which are defined by an authority, how fair are those rules? Won't those rules actually affect what you are trying to promote, whistleblowing? Or will they actually result in people fearing to conduct investigative journalism in the instance that maybe, you're trying to investigate a certain individual who might be influential or of high political office, and that the whistleblowing rules can be used against you, and then you cannot investigate such cases. So these are the sections and provisions of the law that are a bit problematic in Zimbabwe in terms of freedom of expression.
Mm-hmm. Now let's move on to Zambia now. I know your research also focused on Zambia, the same laws of Cyber Security and Data Protection Act in Zambia there. Now let's compare how the Zambia one is structured and how it's violating or affecting or the daily work of the journalists, of content creators. Let's look at the Zambia now, the law and the issue of Cyber Security and Data Protection Act.
Okay, so the Zambian Act as well, similar to the Zimbabwean Act, also provides for the establishment of the Central Monitoring and Coordination Center. And this is run through a government communications department, but it does not specify which communications department within the government. So it's also open to abuse. And then the Zambian law also talks of posting or sharing content which can corrupt morals, So who defines morality? Is it the citizens or is it the state? So by saying that posting or sharing information that corrupt morals, the law also provides for ambiguity. It's similar to the Zimbabwean one. Whilst the Zimbabwean law talks of intent to cause harm, in Zambia they say anything that corrupts morals. So anything that is shared or published by journalists can be used against them through these provisions of the law. And then the Zambian Act also provides for search and seizure of any digital equipment or ICT equipment that one may use in their practice to investigate. So journalists are forced to then self-censor themselves, or anyone can get their devices seized by the state. This could be a cell phone, this could be your laptop, and allowing them to actually go through it and search anything in relation to how you use these devices. Then also there is lawful interception, which is Section 28, which also provides that a police officer or a law enforcement officer can actually, if they believe that an offense has been committed, they can actually intercept any form of communication, and they need written consent from the Attorney General But if that they feel that someone's life is at risk, they can intercept without that letter or a High Court judge's authorization. So this allows for law enforcement officers to intercept anyone's communication at any time, and they can easily manipulate this and believe that and state that someone's life is at risk, even if it's not. And so the Zambian law has also some inadequacies, but these laws are also essential, to stop child pornography and, cyberbullying. But then how do you define cyberbullying? Because at times, this can be used to manipulate anyone who feels that them being investigated is a form of cyberbullying. So the laws have got ambiguous terms, which are not clear, concise, and precise on defining these specific terms. And this is some of the issues that we have with these two laws.
Guys, if you're just joining us this morning, this is Asake Online. This is the CITE View. My name is Brighton Ncube, and my guest this morning is Ellison Shumba, the candidate at the UJ, looking at the issue of cybersecurity, how these laws are affecting freedom of expression, and also is comparing to the Cybersecurity Act in Zimbabwe and also in Zambia. But now, let's move on, Ellison, to the issue now that I was speaking earlier today about the issue of third parties being involved, right? To say, at times we see political parties getting our data from perhaps another source and sending us text messages to say, on this particular day, you're coming to do a rally there, and you see another company getting our data elsewhere, SMSing us, and so on. Let's talk about the legality of these things. Are they part of from the law in Zambia? I know are they part of the law in Zimbabwe? Is it legal to have another third party accessing my details?
Well, no, it's not legal. They should have consent to use your details. I think the issue of consent is something that has been put in place in terms of most of the major laws globally. If we talk of the GDPR in the EU, the issue of consent, if you give consent for your data to be used, then that is fine. But consent can also be revoked. And this is something that both the Zimbabwean law and the Zambian laws have tried to address. But the issue with these laws is that they are not as clear and as concise, or to actually stress the point on consent in terms of you accessing someone else's data or using it, which is the issue that, it kind of leaves it open to manipulation at most.
Quite interesting, but also I know there are also some negatives in terms of these laws, right? I know operation of children, of minors, and also the sharing of nudity on social media platforms. Speak to us now around the issue of negative, or positives there in terms of these two laws, something which are good in these two laws. Speak to us around this, compare these two, what's good coming from these two laws, in particular focus on minors and also sharing of nudity on social media platforms.
I think when it comes to sharing of pornographic images, both laws cover that, and especially when it relates to sharing of pornographic images for minors. And also when it comes to fighting cybercrime, when they take your card and they use it for, or they hack your accounts and stuff like that. So those are some of the positives that are in these laws because they are fighting cybercrime. And, the Zimbabwean law in itself, the Data Protection and Cybersecurity Act, it actually also covers the Interception to Communication Act and the other criminal provisions. So things like cybercrime, where people use your cards and they steal from your accounts, and hacking are also addressed in these laws. So these are some of the positives that come with these laws, and this is across the board, especially in Zimbabwe and Zambia. And one of the major things about the two countries is that they also look at the SADC model law, which was passed, and some of the provisions have been drawn from the SADC model law. So it's more of a regional perspective, where we come to cross-border transfer and sharing of data, which allows for probably countries in Southern Africa to trade freely and allow sharing and of data. So these are some of the positive, when you look at cross-border transfer of data, and also fighting cybercrime, as well as issues of cyberbullying, child pornography, and also just, when we look at how people bully each other online. So, and these are some of the things that have been addressed, and these are the positives that we pick out from these two laws.
Mm-hmm. Last week we saw an SI coming out, SI 155 of 2024. We saw the minister addressing a Potra's breakfast meeting here in Bulawayo and raising the issue of licensing of WhatsApp groups. Many people have been choosing about that. Speak to us about around that SI. What's your understanding of that SI? I know the minister said no, it's a fake news. She has refuted those claims, but however, speak to us more about that SI. What's your understanding of that SI?
Okay, I think the SI, first of all, it's actually interesting that the SI comes out at this time, and also the minister having posted on LinkedIn and stating that WhatsApp groups have to be licensed and that the administrators of these groups have to have a data protection officer for a group of a number starting from 50 going forward, and also telling us about the licensing fees. And then she then came back and posted that that was fake news. Of course, she is the one who posted what she says is fake news, which was quite interesting. But I think the SI unit, it's rather unfair for any government to want to tax people for using a platform that they did not create. I think what the Zimbabwe government should do is to actually deal with WhatsApp itself, the platform, because that is not their platform. And will they do this with other platforms? Because people have got business groups, even on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Will you then go to each and every platform and text it? So I think, first of all, I'm very worried with Potras and the number of duties that Potras has to do, from also training the data protection officers. Who are these people? How are they going to be selected? Where will they come from? Are they not going to be conducting surveillance on behalf of Potras or the state? This is why it's important to have a data protection authority which is independent from the state, not one that is appointed through a law from parliament. So there are so many loopholes, and I think the SI unit is really not creating an environment that enables startups to operate in Zimbabwe and take advantage of platforms such as WhatsApp. So it's a retrogressive SI unit, and it has actually hit the headlines globally. And it just goes on to show that maybe Zimbabwe is moving into more digital authoritarianism by getting people to pay to use platforms that they did not create, such as WhatsApp. What about digital innovators in Zimbabwe? How will they create their own platforms if they are forced to pay taxes for platforms such as WhatsApp, which are global, So I think it's a very, very sad situation, and we hope that it will be addressed in a better way, not just by the minister calling it fake news, which she's the one who said it, but by actually, trying to build things within the digital space of Zimbabwe. I think it would have been wiser if she had started by creating digital websites for the government itself, and not using Gmail as a platform for their emails. Yet, they don't get taxed for that, but then taxing people for WhatsApp, it's actually a very sad scenario. But I think having digital data protection officers trained by Potras is also quite, you need to be worried about that, because who are these people? And why don't we have an independent data protection authority? And why don't they get trained by an independent body where we know it will be fair and not biased in terms of the state? So I think it's very worrisome indeed.
Yeah. Maybe also, what's the impact in terms of these days everyone's using internet, everyone's on Twitter, everyone's on Facebook, everyone is on WhatsApp, right? Some people are creating content, some people are monetizing these things. What are the effects of this thing of paying licenses also coming into effect? How is it going to affect people are creating content online, people are selling things online? How it's going to affect them?
Of course, I think people might just be worrisome or even scared to actually still conduct their business on WhatsApp. So it might result in people drawing back, or people might find ways to beat the system. Set up a WhatsApp group with a number from another country. How will you regulate that? In fact, it will be very interesting to see how Potras will regulate people to pay for the licenses. let alone to get a data protection officer looking at a group with 50 people. I think when it comes to WhatsApp, this is why I say the issue of consent is very important. If I enter a group on WhatsApp, it's with my consent that they have my number and then they have all my details, right? Because I'm willing to share them. Why then should someone be made to pay for something that they have done with their consent? The issue of consent that lacks within the Data Protection Act in Zimbabwe. It should be the main issue where consent can be given and revoked at any time. I can enter a group and leave. But then the SI, the statutory instrument, is very problematic in that, in a state like Zimbabwe where the economy is struggling and people are trying to make ends meet by creating WhatsApp groups and doing small businesses that generate very little revenue, and then they now have to pay for a license. It's actually just taxing people on more taxes that they are already facing and an economy that is really struggling. So it's really retrogressive, and data costs are also expensive. So for people to even buy data to be on WhatsApp and then be taxed to be having that group, it's like double taxation, So it's a very sad situation, and I think there's need for people to go back on the drawing board and see how they can make things easier for the citizens and for the people that they serve, But it's unfortunate that sometimes there's mediocrity in terms of, the people who are pushing for these things, and they do not put the people's interests first.
Mm-hmm. Now, maybe let's focus more on other countries in SADC region or Africa or in the entire world that have done this issue of licensing there. Are there any countries that have done this before, and how has it been done in other countries?
So this is the interesting part. Just this morning, when I thought about our discussion, I actually did a quick search to find out if there are any other countries which have done it with WhatsApp, specifically with WhatsApp. And it was really hard to find one. Maybe there is one. I'm not sure. I will continue doing the search. But what I know is in the past, in Zambia, for example, because it's a country that I'm doing research on in similar laws, they wanted to tax Netflix, not Netflix users, but Netflix, the actual organization, because it's operating in their country and it's generating revenue in their country. So it's better off you fight the platform, not fight the users of the platform. In South Africa, I can tell you about the Competition Commission right now and the fight with Google, as well as I think you saw that Russia even sued Google as well in terms of their content of being taken off from Google. So you have to fight the platform, not the users of the platform, because the platform is not owned by them. The people making money from these platforms are the big tech companies, your Meta, your Twitter, not the users. So one thing that our government should do is to talk to these platforms. But usually, Zimbabwe being a small jurisdiction, just like most of the African countries, the platforms won't take you seriously. But in Europe, some of these platforms have been made to pay at least 5% of their annual revenues because of the data that they take from the citizens in Europe. So it's about, Africa or SADC, when you go as a region and you challenge these platforms, instead of taxing the ordinary user who is even struggling to buy data to use those platforms, this is something that you can do. Because eventually in Zambia, they actually saw that it won't work with Netflix. What Netflix can only do is to provide content creators in Zambia with a chance of airing their content on the platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe as we close off the show this morning, Ellison, what other findings did you have in terms of doing research around comparing Zambia and Zimbabwe in terms of the Cyber Civil Data Protection Act? Any other findings from your research?
Well, my findings, I looked deeper into the making of these laws, the people who were involved in the making of the laws, whose interests did they actually, pursue in how the laws eventually came out and how the laws have been applied. But I wouldn't want to share much, because what's the point? I want people to read this when I'm done. So I think when I'm done, it will be interesting that people can read more on the findings, interesting findings, do the ordinary citizens get involved in the making of the laws? And if they do the lawmakers listen? Does Parliament listen? Or eventually the law's outcome is actually different from what has been said by the people? So this is why, when the statutory instrument came, there was so much noise about it, and people even to this day are talking about it. And the minister trying to actually come back and apologize and try to change the narrative of what she said. It's because these things go against how the people use the platform and how they tend to benefit from this platform, which has nothing to do with the state. It's not owned by the state. It's an independent global player. So try and make it easier for the people to use the platform instead of making it difficult, unless, of course, there are other reasons why this is being done.
Mm-hmm. Ellison Shumba, thanks so much for your time, for joining us on Asake Online this morning.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, that was Ellison Shumba, the PhD student at UJ University in South Africa. They're studying issues of cybersecurity and data protection. They focus on Zambia and Zimbabwe. There you have it, spoke about many things, his findings in terms of those two laws and how they are violating people's rights and also freedom of expression. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. And we'll come to the end of the show for this morning. Hope you guys are going to follow all this discussion and looking forward to see that paper also coming out soon, right?
Yeah, you will soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. Guys, have a good day. Thank you so much for watching this morning. You can follow CITE on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. We're there to give you all breaking stories. From myself, Brighton Ncube. It's bye for now.